Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. And joining us, welcome back to the program. But right off the headlines, we saw this column and said we need to get in touch with J. Christian Adams and, of course, General Counsel and President of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. But an incredible expose last week regarding an organization for the Center for Technology and Civic Life and its impact on the 2020 elections. Thank you so much for joining us back on the program, and I hope your holiday season has been going well and shaping up nicely.
Well, thanks for having me.
So basically, the Center for Technology and Civic Life is what commonly is referred to as an NGO, correct?
Yeah, they're a 501c3 charity, just like your local charity down the street.
So they get money, it's tax advantaged, their tax advantage, the donors can write off their money, and then they go out and they do electioneering work. In one case in your story, stunning to me, they seem to have given more money to the Philadelphia election officials than Philadelphia did. I mean, so first and foremost, give us a feel for the nuts and bolts of what their work has turned into, especially as it relates to 2020.
Right. The Center for Technology and Civic Life has got basically hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not talking about like a couple million. I'm talking hundreds of millions, as well as some allied charities, not just them. What they did this year is they gave hundreds of millions of dollars to election offices. That's the government. It's like you going down and giving money at City Hall as a gift. Well, that's what they did. And they did it in strategic places like Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, Atlanta. And they gave these hundreds of millions of dollars to election offices. And they gave them to election offices to change how those offices run. All of it's legal, guys. Don't hear this and say that it's some sort of illegality. It's not. You can go give money to the government if you want to. And these election offices changed how they did business. And what they did is they were on steroids. They were hypercharged. They were caffeinated. They were driving around collecting ballots. They were knocking on doors. They were doing everything they could to boost turnout in these urban areas, and all doing it with private money.
So was any of the technology part of this? We read a lot about Dominion, and I'm not going to sit here and say Dominion did this or that because I have no evidence of it, but certainly there's a lot of smoke somewhere, and it seems like even here in Virginia, Dominion machines showed up. Was this some of what this money went to? Is like, hey, if we give you this money, you could use it to buy these machines?
No.
Okay.
And understand something. You don't need to commit crimes. And that's what the whole Dominion conspiracy theory is based on.
Okay.
Is people committing crimes. You don't need to commit the crime if you devise a system that results in massive spikes in urban turnout, because you know how those folks are going to vote. Even if Trump got 15% of the black vote, which is up from like 7 or 8%.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume Trump got a lot more black vote. Who cares if you were able to increase turnout in Atlanta, 40%. Or 50% or 20%. If you're able to increase turnout in Milwaukee, who cares if Trump gets more black vote? You can still swamp it statewide. And this explains a lot of things. It explains why House Republicans did so good in Congress and yet the president lost. It explains why there were so many undervotes, meaning only voting for president in urban areas. Because there's so many people who don't normally vote, and the money reached and touched them, and all they really did was vote for the top of the ticket. So this money explains you don't need machines that are hacked from Mars or from the CIA to do what this did legally.
And that's the money word right there. That is it. And we've been having this discussion since the beginning. We here in Virginia with the governor's ability to have an unending state of emergency so he can just write election law on the fly, like on a cocktail napkin, is something the legislature, whether it was a blind spot or intentional, left in there. So the governor has no requirement to get reauthorized for a state of emergency.
Right. And all of this interfaces what we just described about the money, the private money, interfaces with COVID. Mm-hmm. In other words, the ability to change laws, the ability to go and do mail balloting in hyperspeed,
Yep.
to abandon safeguards. I had to take Virginia to court, and I actually won because Virginia tried to abandon the deadline. They wanted to say, oh, ballots can come in late and they don't need a postmark. Well, that's not what the statute says, so I sued them, and I was able to enjoin them from enforcing that rule. But they changed a lot of other rules through COVID. And
witness, the witness requirement for absentee, the excuse requirement for absentee. I mean, two of the big ones, right?
That's right. Those were in a Western District of a federal court in Roanoke in front of Judge Norman K. Moon. We were actually, the Public Interest Legal Foundation was an amicus on that case. And I sat through a lot of the hearings listening to the court just being completely willing to do what the plaintiffs and the defendants wanted, which, by the way, you heard me correctly, what the plaintiffs and defendants wanted, meaning it was collusive. So, it was just a total breakdown in the system.
So you talk about the legalities of this, so the blind spots in the law. I've often made this case. We love to talk about the sexy issues in the news, this budget vote, that funding stream, did Planned Parenthood get this? But these are these process stories about, 2 o'clock in the morning, the House Reform and Government Affairs Committee passed election rules that allow for X, Y, and Z. And talk radio doesn't get excited about it. The blogs rarely cover it at all. Chris, I know you do, but it's not that sexy headline-grabbing story that is going to burn up the internet. But then we turn around and we're here.
Right, and this is why the Public Interest Legal Foundation exists, because this is all we care about is process. And the left cares a great deal about process. They care more about process and policy because they know if they win the process issues, they will eventually win the policy issues. So why spend money trying to persuade and change your heart when they can just go out and change the rules? And so they care more about process than they do policy.
So now I want to get to the 800-pound gorilla in the room. In your column about the Center for Technology and Civic Life, I wasn't sure if this person was the founder, he and his wife, or just one of the most egregious contributors to them. And funny, there was his face testifying several times during the election season in front of Senate committees, Mark Zuckerberg. And no, it's not another Mark Zuckerberg. It's the same one from Facebook. Your column chronicles that they gave $350 million to this organization?
Right. This is an organization that's their budget last year was $600,000. I mean,
wow.
I want to get involved in that company, right? Like you go from $600,000 to $350 million. But remember, it wasn't just the Center for Technology and Civic Life. There were other groups that were funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into this rigged system, and so it was Zuckerberg and a whole bunch of other philanthropists who built structural bias into the election this year.
It's interesting because I can hear my friends who are members of the Democratic Party and their constant whine about dark money. So bad did they castigate some of the conservatives that fund organizations like Americans for Prosperity that you even had a Newsweek profile of Charlie Koch where he apologized for all of the political activities he engaged in, including but not limited to founding Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Works. And now he's out there trying to get, I guess, penance as he ages, but the left screams about dark money. Isn't this dark money, Christian?
Well, yeah, this is the darkest of dark money. We don't even know who it was in some of these cases that was donating the money other than at the pass-through C3. So, and you bring up the Koch, that's a whole other topic because they're not very helpful on these issues that we're talking about. And so... this is pure dark money. You won't hear a lot of people complain about this kind of dark money that normally complain about dark money.
There was an incident, I guess, a year or so ago where Michael Bloomberg had an NGO, one of these 501c3s, working out of NYU with basically his money. that was trying to hire lawyers and put them into attorneys general offices in Virginia and many other places to do specific work to, quote, help. And when I read your column last week, Christian, it seemed so much like what Michael Bloomberg was trying to do with climate change in these attorney general's office. Is there
right? That was just a warm up. That was a warm up, but it's happening in Virginia. I mean, the Virginia State Board of Elections has been taking Soros money and labor for a while now, using something called Designs for Democracy, where they do all this artwork and ballot layout and materials, all, of course, targeted to certain demographics that will vote the way they want. But, hey, it sounds really nice. Hey, they're just donating their time. Isn't that a good thing? See how diabolical they are. They utilize general American goodwill that, we think it's a good thing when you devote time and energy to civic causes. But in the end, it's all about politics and ideology.
Well, it also goes back to something, and when I first brought up your story, I had a listener say, I thought you were a fiscal conservative, Joe, and this certainly saves the government money if they help. I'm like, there were...
No, that's an easy one. They don't save any money. They build in a government program that benefits one side. It's like, what if I gave the zoning board a whole bunch of employees who will always rule against your caller that you just described whenever they have an application to do something, that they're predisposed to take one side and create an outcome that is biased. It's not fiscal conservatism to take a $10 million city budget to run elections and then add $10 million to it through private money that is specifically designed to benefit one party. That's not fiscal conservatism. That's structural bias.
And I also made the case, and it's a common one, what if the NRA's philanthropic charity arm decided to do the same thing or tried to do the same thing? Do you think we would have heard about that on 60 Minutes? That's
right. I mean, that's the dirty truth, that if there was a conservative philanthropist who could donate $500 million to do this in red counties, because that's really the secret of this, is do it in deep blue counties like Philadelphia. But if you did it in red counties and you focused on gun rights or something like that, you know exactly what the New York Times would be writing. It's no mystery. They would go berserk. They would probably have shut down the offices programs. So, look, this is structural bias. It's making the system unfair, period.
J. Christian Adams is the president and general counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. An amazing piece. We'll share it as social media so you can read the piece he wrote on the Center for Technology and Civic Life. And again, an Orwellian title, if I ever read one. And Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, and the $350 million just from them to pay for government operations. This used to be the stuff of science fiction. RoboCop. Oh, we can't afford the police anymore, so we're going to subcontract out to it. The left screamed about Whitewater, and we were subcontracting out our military operations. At some point, we have to go back to a place where there are certain core functions of the government that they have to do before they fund all the things that they like to put into their campaign literature. Because I feel like that's where they are. Is they really don't put the effort behind vote sanctity, and then when it comes time for it, they're like, oh, we don't have any money left because we gave it all to this social program or that safety net program. So when somebody comes along and says, hey, I got $500 million, you want that? The most government officials will probably say, sure. Yeah,
and I can't wait to learn about all the criminal chicanery that's going to come out of this in time. When you dump $10 million into the streets in Philadelphia, bad things always happen.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's always on the grift, someone's on the take. We'll eventually find out who that is, but it's just a stupid idea.
Is some of the statistical anomalies, you mentioned Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, where the Center for Technology and Civic Life was spending its money, and you also mentioned the president had really done stunning things with the percentage of the black population that made up his vote. Yeah, but yet in these urban areas, that number drops to 2%. So was it really something where we could make the case, given the statistical anomalies of their vote, that if every other part of the country, 15% of Donald Trump's vote came from the African-American community, and in Philadelphia next to none did, that seems to tell me that not only were they getting the vote out, but they were also suggesting who you should put on it.
You don't have to do that. I mean, look, there's political scientists who will explain this, and I've read some of the affidavits. This is a real specialty, is understanding political behavior. And too often people are jumping at shiny objects. Let me try to explain that one. Mm-hmm. If you're going to the lowest of low propensity voters in Philadelphia, people who've, pretty much never voted at all, and you're going to them and you're going to their door and saying, and they don't want to answer the door. They don't want to even open the door. And then when you say, look, I'm only going to take 20 seconds of your time. We want you to vote. Here's your ballot. And part of the bargain of only taking 20 seconds is to not vote the whole ballot.
Right.
Right? You get in and out quick. And so it doesn't surprise me at all, the statistical anomaly of undervotes. Not in the slightest. I would be shocked if there weren't undervotes. And so... and also the when you dig down to the lowest propensity voter in Philadelphia, you're going to break out of the national Trump African-American vote pattern, because you're dipping down into the lowest propensity voter, and they're not going to be affected by the news or the policies of the administration that drove the black vote up to, higher levels. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that these ballots are all coming back for Biden, because you're dipping into the lowest propensity voters. There's plenty of precincts out there. I got to tell you, when I was at the Justice Department, we did voting rights cases that there were always precincts with massive, inexplicable one-way voting. That's just how it is in some of these communities.
So what comes of this? How do we get the transparency back to this, where we can have faith in the election? Because I really feel like part of this is not even so much about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but we will so lose faith in our elections that we will allow Congress to create a parliamentary presidency just to get it off our backs, because we don't trust our neighbors to vote anymore.
Actually, I think it's going to get worse. If the Georgia Senate races go badly, they're going to nationalize a lot of these bad behaviors that happened this year. That's what the Democrats passed through the House with H.R. 1 last Congress. They're going to try to federalize vote by mail, federalize no voter ID, federalize same-day registration. All of the chicanery that you watched in 2020, Nancy Pelosi wants to make federal law. So I'm more worried about how much worse it's going to get rather than how we fix anything.
We're just trying to hold a brick into the dam, Christian. It sounds like, and a daunting task it is, because this seems like what all the other classic democracies of mankind's history collapsed under. We're all voting with our pocketbooks. We're all saying who's going to get us the most money, or who's promising to get us the most money, and the economy is going to be the thing that tears us down, aside from just being tearing at each other.
Well, look, there's a reason the founders chose only one democratic institution, and that is the House of Representatives. There's a reason the founders wanted the Senate to be elected by the state legislatures. There's a reason that the founders gave the state legislatures the absolute power to pick the electors for the Electoral College, because they knew what barbarians humans can become when power's at stake. And, the progressive left likes to dream of utopia, but you can't escape the gravity of human nature. And that's unfortunate. And, it shows you how blessed we've been for 200 and some years.
We were talking to another guest who said we're sort of playing with the last remaining bits of our inheritance, and I'm worried that we are that generational idiot sons of the idiot sons who are about to ruin the business that Grandpa started because we have no idea why. Are there people that get it along with you? And I'd like to think I do, at least because I listen to you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's some truth. There's lots of people out there that get it. You can just look at an electoral map of counties, red versus blue of the entire country, and you'll see the people who understand human nature and believe in limited government, we outnumber the lunatics in the blue corps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, notwithstanding places like Charlottesville, but the blue counties are a small minority and they're very densely populated. They're usually miserable places to be, where people catch COVID and there's litter everywhere, and that's part of why they're getting more intense. Is because people there are getting more unhappy, and the people in those red counties, they know what America's all about. It's about freedom, individual dignity, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom to pursue your dreams. And they get it. And let's just put it this way, they've got a lot more firepower than the people in those blue corps.
Let me circle to one thing that I find interesting, because it was written by, in part, by a former Georgia governor, as we look in on Georgia as one of those places, especially with the Senate race. But that report that James Baker and Jimmy Carter led, that came out in 2005, that literally goes piece by piece through everything we did wrong this year. Christian, how does that happen? Have we just, are we such short attention span theater lovers that we that was 05. That was 15 years ago. I'm too busy for that now.
Yeah, who cares about reports when you're talking about power?
Yeah.
What difference does a report make? I mean, that's one of the things conservatives need to start to grapple with, is reports don't drive the country. Reports are ignored. White papers are ignored. The left deals in the world of muscular power, taking control, dictating the rules, changing the rules, showing up and being a poll official. For the last year, I've been preaching, you got to volunteer to be a poll official, to have the power, right?
Yeah.
And people were fixated on becoming observers. I want to be a party observer. No, the left understands the power is with the poll official, not the observer. So why do you want to be an observer? And so we just don't understand the nature of power enough, and that's why we lose it.
And we have 7 people that run for Congress or the nomination, and then they walk away when they don't win, and we have no election officials left.
Yeah, and I just thought of something germane to your question. Look, I appreciate libertarian ideology, right? I'm kind of a libertarian in my core. But in 2020, if you're pulling the lever for a libertarian, you're out of your mind. I'm sorry. I voted for libertarians for president. But in 2020, if you're voting for a libertarian for president, you're really voting for a socialist Democrat, period. Because you've peeled off votes. It's the Constitution versus the enemies of the Constitution, period. And, are we going to vote on pot? Is that really, truly what is the most motivating issue to you? I mean, I'm sorry. Libertarians owe a serious bit of responsibility for the outcome of this election. Because they just wasted their vote and gave Joe Biden wins in a lot of states.
The interesting thing is sad to say, by policy and position, Donald Trump is the most libertarian president we've ever had.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. He doesn't emphasize a lot of the issues that have been touchstone libertarian issues, for 20 or 30 years, drugs being one. That's not his area of emphasis. There's others I won't get into here, but you can see that he's the most libertarian president that's ever existed, probably going back to maybe Calvin Coolidge.
Right.
And so it's ridiculous if you're a libertarian and you voted for a libertarian for president.
It's an amazing time. Christian Adams, thank you so much for your time. This column, again, is Public Interest Legal. Follow him at Election Law Center on Twitter as well. Thank you for uncovering this. I don't know what comes of it, but something's going to have to eventually, right?
Right. Well, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening this week and for all of your support. Virginia Institute for Public Policy, vainstitute.org. Until next week, I'm Joe Thomas. So long, and thanks for all the fish.